Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking on a huge story, the entire history of the United States. We're going to break down how a small collection of colonies grew into the world's most powerful nation, all in one go. I mean, it's a pretty wild question when you think about it. It's a rise that, in a lot of ways, nobody saw coming. So today, we're going to chart that exact story, the key moments, the conflicts, and the ideas that took a colonial outpost and turned it into a global giant. So, we've broken this incredible journey down into 5 acts. We'll track the major shifts that really defined each period, from a revolutionary idea all the way to its modern-day reality. Let's start at the very beginning. All right, so our story doesn't start with a country, but with this idea of a new world. European explorers like Christopher Columbus weren't actually looking for America, they were just trying to find a faster way to get to Asia. So for, over 150 years, European powers, especially the British, carved out a serious foothold, from Jamestown in 1607 all the way up to 1732, when all 13 colonies were up and running. These places grew into their own unique societies. But here's the thing. This whole colonial project was really expensive. And after Britain won the very costly French and Indian War, it was drowning in debt, and it turned to the American colonies to help foot the bill. To raise that cash, Parliament in London started imposing direct taxes on things in the colonies, stuff like the Sugar Act and the Stamp Act. Now, for the colonists, this wasn't just about money. It was about something much bigger, a core principle they felt was being violated. And this became the powerful, unifying rallying cry for a revolution. The colonists argued that since they didn't have anyone elected to represent them in the British Parliament, Parliament had no right to tax them. Simple as that. They felt like their basic rights as British citizens were just being thrown out the window. This defiance eventually boiled over into all-out war. And after a long, brutal fight, and with some major help from France, the colonies actually did the impossible. But their victory wasn't just on the battlefield. It gave birth to a totally new kind of government, one built on the ideals of liberty and self-rule. But now, this young nation had to figure out what to do with a vast continent literally sitting at its back door. So the brand new nation is no longer just stuck on the East Coast. You've got these huge lands to the west, lands that were, of course, already home to hundreds of indigenous nations. And this powerful, aggressive idea starts to take hold that would really define the next 100 years of American history. This belief had a name, Manifest Destiny. It was this deep conviction that American expansion wasn't just going to happen, but that it was God's will. It was inevitable. And it fueled this relentless, often violent push westward that completely redrew the map. Through buying land, making treaties, and fighting wars, the United States just exploded in size. I mean, the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, that doubled the country's size overnight. Just like that. But all of this rapid expansion was basically covering up this deep, infected wound that was about to tear the nation completely in half. The thing is, the country was really 2 different worlds flying the same flag. In the North, you had an industrializing economy that had gotten rid of slavery. But in the South, you had a farming economy built entirely on the brutal institution of slavery. So every time a new territory was added, the burning question was always the same. Would it be a free state or a slave state? This tension finally exploded in 1861, kicking off the Civil War, the absolute deadliest conflict in American history. After 4 bloody years, the North's victory saved the Union and finally abolished slavery, but the war left these deep, deep scars that would shape the country for generations. Okay, so in the decades after the incredible trauma of the Civil War, the reunited nation went through another massive change. This period is known as the Gilded Age, and it's called that for a reason. It looks shiny and wealthy on the surface, but underneath, a lot of deep social problems. This is when the United States really became the world's #1 industrial power. Just look at that number, plus 567%. I mean, that's staggering, right? It tells you everything you need to know about the sheer speed of this change. A massive web of railroads stitched the country together, moving raw materials from the west to the factories in the east. This created huge fortunes and just fueled this unbelievable growth in steel, oil, and finance. So, with all this new economic power, America starts to flex its muscles on the world stage. The very quick and decisive victory in the Spanish-American War was a huge turning point. All of a sudden, the U.S. had an overseas empire, and leaders like Theodore Roosevelt fully embraced this new role, building a powerful navy and the Panama Canal to project American power across the entire globe. The 20th century, well, it was a whole different ballgame. A century of absolute global chaos. Two devastating world wars would completely shatter the old European empires. And out of all that fire and chaos, a new superpower was going to be forged. Now, here's the crucial part. America's experience in these wars was totally different from Europe's. The U.S. entered both world wars late, and its homeland was never a battlefield. So while Europe and Asia were literally being torn apart, American industry was booming, supplying the Allies. The U.S. came out of the wars not weaker, but with the world's strongest economy, creating a power vacuum that it was perfectly positioned to fill. Okay, so WWI ends, and in the rubble, only one real challenger to America's dominance is left standing: the Soviet Union. And this is what kicks off the Cold War. It was this nearly 50-year global showdown. Not a direct hot war between the two giants. The threat of nuclear war was just too terrifying for that. But it was a struggle for influence fought on every corner of the planet. And this conflict was fought in all these different ways. There were military alliances like NATO, technological rivalries like the space race to the moon, and tragic, real wars, proxy wars, in places like Korea and Vietnam. Then, in 1991, the Soviet Union finally collapsed. The struggle was over. And just like that, the United States was left standing alone as the world's undisputed sole superpower. The end of the Cold War seemed to promise a new era of peace and stability. You'd think this would be an era of peace, right? Well, not exactly. The 21st century brought a whole new set of complex challenges that tested the nation in ways no one really saw coming. You see, the modern era has been shaped by these huge, transformative events. At home, you've got the long, ongoing struggle for civil rights, trying to finally dismantle the deep-seated legacy of slavery and segregation. And then from the outside, the shock of the 9/11 attacks launched a global war on terror. All of this, combined with a massive financial crisis and growing political divisions, has shaped the very complex America we see today. And even with all its economic might, the nation is dealing with some serious issues internally. And this chart, wow, it really lays it bare. The top 1% alone controls over 40% of the nation's wealth. Meanwhile, the bottom 90% of the population holds just a little over a quarter. Think about that. This growing inequality has become a source of intense social tension and debate, and it really calls the very idea of the American dream into question. So where does that leave us? From a wild idea born from a tax protest to a global superpower trying to navigate a complex new century, it's been a crazy ride, right? The history of the United States has always been one of constant, often turbulent change. As new global powers rise and its own internal divisions deepen, the central question remains: what will the next chapter of this grand, unfinished experiment look like? The one thing we know for sure is that the world will be watching.